All right, 26 minutes. It's going to be big. Big. Welcome to the PC Perspective Mailbag. This is episode number 58 and is being recorded for October 12th, 2018. My name's Josh Walrath, and I do this every once in a while when the boys are away. And let me tell you, this week, the boys are away. If you have any questions you would like to be addressed on this mailbag, please go ahead and respond either in comments on the website where this is posted or in YouTube comments. We also keep track of people who talk to us over Twitter, and so oftentimes that is an area where we get many of these questions from. So feel free to contact us however which way you want. Well, not every way. But moving along. The first question comes from John STF72. Do you think we'll see AMD GPUs with ray tracing capabilities in the next few months to compete with NVIDIA? That's a really good question. We don't really know much about what's going on with what comes after Vega. We've got the 7nm Vega stuff coming here in the next couple of months, but that's going to be for professional type applications. I don't think we're going to see that in you know the mainstream market anytime soon. There are rumors that we may see a 12nm refresh of the RX 580 series, which was a refresh of the RX 480 series and all that. That's not entirely out of line. They could possibly do that. I think GlobalFoundries has plenty of capacity with their 12nm process, even with AMD kind of hammering them with CPUs in both the desktop and the upcoming EPYC stuff. Well, not upcoming, it's current. But I can see AMD not having a hardware implementation like NVIDIA has with their RTX 2000 series. I just don't see them being that responsive, nor have they really considered that in the last couple of years, because these designs obviously take many, many years. But what I would expect is them to have the ability, through a lot of software, to utilize the compute units in the current Vega and Polaris and whatever is coming up, Navi, I believe, to be more effective in ray tracing, because DirectX has a ray tracing routine and Vulkan does as well. So they're probably working on software that will more adequately do some ray tracing. Now, having said that, will it be as effective as what we see with NVIDIA? Probably not, but time will tell, because NVIDIA did a massive redesign with the RTX series. I mean, just even their regular pixel pushing of DX9, DX11, DX12 type stuff without ray tracing, they all saw pretty significant performance increase at each kind of level, whether it's the RTX 2070, 2080, or the 2080 Ti. And so those price points are a little bit higher than what we see with the 10 series previously, but we do see an increase in just basic performance. I mean, they did a lot of tweaking internally to not only add RTX stuff, but to just increase the efficiency and the functionality of their RTX series. And they're really interesting. They are inflated in terms of die size and transistor budget as compared to the previous generation, but you get more performance at around the same TDP. So AMD's not going to have anything coming up anytime soon that I've heard of. And again, you got to plan well in advance, and this is something that NVIDIA has been working on a long time. AMD just doesn't have the R&D resources. They have to focus on where they think the majority of the market is going to be, and I don't think that they veered off and probably have a dedicated ray tracing engine like we see internal to the RTX chips. So it's going to be interesting to see where RTX goes. If ray tracing is going to be picked up en masse by developers. I know there are certain areas, especially with the machine learning stuff and the tensor cores, like the DLAA or MLAA. I can't remember which acronym it is because I'm not very smart. One of those things, I mean, think that's probably one thing that is going to be implemented more than anything else, because apparently it's pretty trivial to implement that to a game or a game engine, or at least so I hear. It probably isn't. It's probably hard, but anyway, it's I think where the problem mostly is on NVIDIA's side, because they take these games who have been, you know, have that AA support, and they go through their servers just hundreds and hundreds of times and do actual machine learning on this to get the output looking correct, and then they implement that machine learning in their drivers, and it's updated via GeForce Experience, and voila. So I think it isn't so much the developers, it's more on NVIDIA. But that is well away from where I originally answered. So yeah, the short answer is I doubt we're going to see that in the next several months from AMD. Siddharth Rawat: has NVIDIA changed the yardstick for measuring GPU performance? The metrics until now have been higher frame rates at higher resolutions, but it seems we're about to start prioritizing ray tracing performance instead. Would a gamer playing today at 4K or 144 Hz consider it a downgrade to switch to 1080p with ray tracing? Will consumers who invested in 4K and high refresh rate displays feel cheated by the shift to ray tracing, even though there are only a handful of supported titles scheduled in the near future? I don't think that they have changed the yardstick. I mean, we're still real early in the whole ray tracing, especially their implementation. I mean, we saw GameWorks before, we saw PhysX before. These things look to be game changers. They had really interesting implementations, and they could have potentially been great in gaming situations the way they envisioned it, but nothing has really panned out with those. I mean, PhysX is still a thing, but it's not this huge implementation that people had thought that it would be really optimized for, or something would be a big feather in NVIDIA's hat. And instead, you know, we've got people that license PhysX, except they license it only to run on the CPU, just because they need a physics engine, and it's well supported and fully featured, and maybe they offer it at a discount as compared to Havoc. I don't know, but I don't think that the way we view performance is going to be changed. I think people are still going to want to push high frame rates, especially that we have, you know, these 144 hertz monitors that are not TN anymore. Praise the Lord. And that, you know, have good color, good representation. We're starting to throw HDR in the mix. And while ray tracing is pretty cool, and you saw that through a lot of the demos that we saw, I don't know if it's going to take off anytime soon. And even so, people will still have these G-Sync monitors, or, you know, these FreeSync monitors that are 24, 27, 32 inch, 34 inch, that do 1440p and above in 4K. They're still going to want that performance in the majority of their games they're playing. I mean, Fortnite doesn't have RTX involved. I mean, it runs super fast at 4K, and you know, people are pretty happy with it with either, you know, under FreeSync or G-Sync. So yeah, I don't think the performance metric has really changed. People are not going to be willing to go back to 1080p, 60 hertz just to get some ray tracing. I mean, we're going to see a lot of, you know, visual tricks to kind of give you some ray tracing like effects, but it won't be like what, you know, we've seen with the RTX stuff or the more traditional ray tracing. I mean, it's a neat feature, but we just don't have enough games to see it, and we don't know the trajectory it's going to have, because again, I think more applications are more interested in the anti-aliasing that they get with, you know, essentially very, very little performance hit due to the machine learning. I could be wrong, but that's kind of my gut feeling, is that we won't see this take off until we get more support from Intel and their graphics, as well as AMD and their GPU guys, because that's technology that's going to be going into CPUs, and it would be nice to have there. And there's, other workloads that could potentially leverage those units, but you got to lay the base platform down, and NVIDIA has certainly done that. Now it's time to see if everybody else responds, or if the industry will push that. I mean, NVIDIA has a pretty big lead over AMD in terms of desktop GPU market share, and they're doing really, really well on the mobile as well, but not as great, obviously, as Intel, because they integrate the graphics in there. So your guess is almost as good as mine. And because I'm the one talking here, I'll take my position in that I don't think we're going to see ray tracing in games take off as quickly as some people hope, and we have yet to see really what kind of performance hit that will take on current titles at not only 1080p but above. And will that have a negative effect on those with the high refresh, higher resolution monitors? And because G-Sync is while it's well supported, I really don't know the installed base, and I don't think, looking at the prices, it's as big as NVIDIA would want. And that would be kind of, if they want to have high resolution games running with RTX, to have the best experience, you need to have G-Sync, because there will be places that I think performance would just tumble, and having G-Sync also attached will not feel as bad to those playing the game. So we'll see. But yeah, I don't think in the next year it's going to be everybody's jumping on to ray tracing and supporting RTX. Dark Sylvie, would you rather see companies push to truly achieve mainstream 4K HDR 60 frames performance with better textures and poly counts instead of this new shift to ray tracing? Well, yeah, I think dovetailing into the previous question, I just don't see the industry going mainstream to ray tracing. And another thing that I failed to mention previously is that consoles, which are still huge in terms of getting games sold, will not support RTX, just because it's AMD GPU technology. And no matter how neat those little SoCs are, utilizing that, they're not going to support ray tracing at all. And so if a developer has a certain budget and they have certain goals, and if NVIDIA is not throwing money at them and helping that, they will not support something that they have to send guys off to learn if they absolutely have to. Improvements in Vulkan and DirectX, they're eventually going to have to support that, and that's something they figure into the cost. But when you get kind of radical in here, like ray tracing, I just don't see developers wanting to really pursue that. And because AMD, not AMD, but NVIDIA, they've got the Tomb Raider folks that they're throwing money at. They've got the Battlefield guys, DICE. I mean, it's in their best interest to like get that technology into Frostbite, because it's licensed around quite a few places. But I haven't heard anything about CryEngine guys, if even they're still doing anything or advancing their technology. So it's going to be interesting to see. There's no ray tracing in any Codemaster title, so racing games, that's not. But I think does the Competizone? I believe it has some of the technology, but I don't know if it's ray tracing or the anti-aliasing. So we'll see. James Reitmer, I recently added a Samsung 970 EVO to my system, but I wasn't able to install Windows on it unless I disconnected all of my other drives first. What could have caused this? I have a two-part answer to this. Alan first says, with some BIOSes, the drive order isn't presented to the Windows installer correctly, so the installer gets confused about which drive is primary. This can lead to the temporary Windows installation files being placed in the wrong location, which then causes the installer to fail when it reboots and is looking for the wrong drive in order to continue. Sometimes this can be fixed by reconfiguring your drive order in the BIOS, but every BIOS is different, and occasionally the only way to ensure it works is to force the installer to see only your primary drive by disconnecting the others. So that's essentially the answer. I know that I have a Z97 board downstairs that I installed everything on there perfectly fine, and then I added an NVMe drive to it, and suddenly I can only connect 2 other drives. So I had either, a data drive. I had the OS drive, I had a data drive, and then I put the NVMe just for testing and to try it as like a game drive to see if it really was faster than an SSD, and we know it's certainly faster than spinning Rust. But every other drive on that machine just dropped. I mean, it was gone. And that's kind of a pain in the butt. So I see what you're coming from. But yeah, the only option is you install it on, you take every other drive out and you install it on your NVMe. And then once you get it up and running and fully installed, you reattach your other drives and see if it craps the bed. Mine did. So it was a learning experience with the Intel boards. I don't know if they've kind of fixed it in the latest, not the 170s, but the 270s, 370s, and now the 390s. Hopefully they have, because previous to that, you put an NVMe drive in there, all these SATA drives would just drop out. They're just, you can't use those anymore. The AMD 300 and 400 series chipsets, they don't seem to have that problem. You will have certain motherboards, they'll tell you in the manual, if you do install an NVMe drive or a U.2 in this, you're going to have, see SATA port whatever go down, but the rest are still usable. And with the Intel ones, boy, that certainly wasn't the case for me. And yeah, it was frustrating, to say the least. Maybe on the 170s and above they fixed that. I don't think they have. I guess I should do more testing. Paul A. Mitchell, who has fabulous hair, says, is anyone else unable to map network drives in Windows 10 after upgrading to version 18.03? Did Microsoft kill off HomeGroup without sufficient testing? Help! Well, Microsoft did kill off HomeGroup, and you have to kind of go back to the older way of sharing files, folders, drives. I mean, it still works with 18.03 and beyond, but you have to go into your network center and you have to open up, you have to disable like password protected file sharing. And you have to go in and, for me, I mean, there's probably a better way of doing this. I go into sharing, I share a drive, I add permissions, and you have to add like guest and have them only as read access. So that way people will be able to see on your network those drives being shared, but certainly don't give them write access. That would be very bad. Somebody comes into your network, plugs in, and some virus sniffs out all kinds of shares, and they want to start writing to it. That's a bad thing. So always have read only, but you gotta add guest and open up the disable password protected unless you have the same username and password on all your machines. So yeah, it's a pain in the butt, but it's always has been since Windows 7. And you had to do kind of the same thing. Windows 10's very much the same, even though HomeGroup made it a little bit easier. You got to go kind of the old-fashioned way. So look up. There's plenty of tutorials out there on how to do it. How I do it is probably not the best way, but I just do it quick and easy, and it works for me. At 1W1W1W1W1. Why do different types of RAM work better on Intel or AMD platforms? I don't know. I mean, we could guess multiple things. I mean, there's going to be memory drive strengths going to be different from, the AMD and the Intel controller. Maybe different latencies internal to these, the low-level ones. Will work better on an Intel controller versus what AMD does, because everybody makes their own memory chips, and you've got different RAS to CAS and TR whatever. I can't remember all of them. I used to a long time ago, but of course I'm not very smart, so I don't remember them. My brain is full. But yeah, there probably are certain dies that perform better with AMD just because of physical characteristics and the way latencies work and how the memory controllers handle that. And these things are just, I mean, you can go and make sure that they work on different machines, and certainly XMP and Intel's AMP. XMP is Intel, AMP is AMD. Those things have helped out tremendously in getting better compatibility. So if you've got somebody that you've got a new AMD platform, and you have a choice between an XMP and an AMP based DIMM, you probably would be better off choosing something that supports AMP, just because it will have better compatibility right out of the box. So there are probably many reasons that I am not an expert on, which we all know, as to why it doesn't work. But yeah, it's just going to be design, latencies, drive strength. All those things may work better with certain chips on Intel than with AMD. Good answer, clear as mud? Probably not. McPeedy4, do you believe the new high-end desktop and the Intel high-end desktop refresh parts to hold the higher frequencies at the same power level as before? And if so, will that be down to the soldered IHS or more of an actual improvement in the core's chip? Will the optimization provide an IPC increase? These are all good questions. The people who usually do benchmarking are only now just getting these chips. Intel has promised many things, but the things that we do know is it's based on, I think, the 14++ nanometer process. They've loosened up some of the dimensions on that, so it's not as dense, but it's going to be higher performance. So it's going to be more efficient in terms of transistor switching speed. TDPs are going to be probably around the same, but you're going to see better boost clocks. And I think that they're saying that all-core boost on that high-end 9900K is something like 4.7 gigahertz most of the time. That's pretty good. Single is up to 5 gigahertz. We'll see how that goes. I think it's going to differ chip from chip. The soldered IHS is certainly going to help in that it will remove heat faster into whatever cooling system you have until it, kind of reaches that regular temperature homeostasis. And so the lower that is, the better your overall performance is going to be, just because it doesn't need more power to be able to switch the transistors when everything's hot. IPC probably is going to have a small improvement, but I don't know if it's going to be anything much. I think that they're mainly going to get along with just having higher average speeds for all core performance. Again, we don't know what to expect yet, because we've only had kind of the canned benchmarks, and that's a whole different can of worms right now with the PT group that released everything for that. I think that the boys will have more to say about that next week when reviews start trickling out, or at least I think it's next week. I don't know entirely for sure. We'll see. And the final question is from Rich Rodriguez. Rich Rod. Do you think Zen 2s and Ryzen 3 will bring memory controller performance into parity with their Intel counterparts? Probably not. I think Intel still has one of the best memory controllers on the market. However, if we look between the old FX series and Ryzen, that was a huge increase in performance in terms of the memory controller. And with Ryzen 2, well, Ryzen 3000 series or Zen 2, I mean, they tweaked the entire chip. I mean, everything is gotten a makeover. It's the second generation. So we can expect performance increases and IPC increases. And I mean, memory controller is a huge part of getting IPC up there. I mean, if you have really good prefetch functions, that means the data is in the cache waiting for the CPU to execute on it. Just streaming performance is going to be improved, obviously. If you can cut down the latency and have the CPU go through fewer cycles while going and grabbing the memory, grabbing the data from main memory, I mean, you're always going to increase your performance overall, just because your CPUs are not wasting cycles for waiting for this data. And so I would expect an increase of, a couple of percent from what we see now with Ryzen. But again, the jump from the old FX series to Ryzen was just absolutely massive in terms of memory performance, memory efficiency. And once you start going into the DDR4 3200 speed, which also increased the speed of the fabric, you had a really nice performing part. And that's only going to get better. But again, I think that if you were to just get into the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of just memory performance with the memory controller, I think Intel still has an advantage there. And they will for however long, just because they've got more people, more R&D budgets, more man hours to throw at any one problem in their CPUs. And AMD eventually just have to say, ship what works. And there you have it. So yeah, it's all a matter of money and engineers. But AMD certainly has closed the gap, and they're far more competitive than they ever have been. And we'll hope that Zen 2 will continue that. And I believe that's the last question. It's like 25 minutes. I'm not sure how I talked for so long. People are going to probably do bad comments to me on YouTube. But hey, what's new? And plus, bad comments are always entertaining. But anyway, my name's Josh Walrath. This has been the PCPer Mailbag. Leave a comment. Leave a question for next week. I'm sure one of the other boys will be back. Probably not me. I think I'm going to be in California. So until then, have a great one.